school-wide goals, and of course, we always have our SPS in the back of our head, and you know, what can get us, there's our new Operation A. So what can get us to Operation A, and we know that we've had everybody really has a big learning curve this year as far as rolling out the new curriculums. So one thing that as a school, we're really gonna focus on is assessments and creating rigorous assessments and making sure that there is that alignment with our assessments and the standards for teaching, and that we are doing backwards design. And so it all is gonna come with just us being prepared and being able to start that 10-day cycle with that assessment in our hand and know what our end goal is gonna be. Also, knowing how the kids, our older kids, are gonna be tested with the LEAP 2025, and y'all are kinda in a, you know, first grade, second grade, kind of towards in January, you can really start to tailor your test to look more like they'll see in third grade. So, whole school, we're gonna do assessment. The first PD is gonna be, we're so lucky we have Miss Square coming on Wednesday, and she's gonna be presenting on assessment. So we're gonna do that one. Now the second one, because we know it's a PGP, Professional Learning Plan, you have an option. You can either choose something on your own. We know that technology is, everybody really needs to be savvy in that area, myself included. You might, Miss Williams is gonna talk about, we really wanna do like a Google One certification for the school. Or we've written a second one, and it's for the CER framework, the claims evidence reasoning framework. So,
how many of you guys have been looking at the claims in the area of social studies and having students to respond to that? So for example, it can be the overall idea, and it doesn't have to be in science and social studies, because it can be in any subject area where it's your overall question for the unit. How many of you guys are actually getting your students to look at that overall goal of the unit that's been put forth and having them discuss and write, or being able to verbally say it and put it in written form?
EL curriculum does that. They pose that, like, the essential question is what they call it, yeah, and what is important about schools.
And we're writing about it.
Yeah.
For the curriculum, writing across the curriculum.
Okay, and so you are aware that in social studies curriculum, they present a claim in the beginning, overall goal for the unit, and then you go back to that and support it with the evidence based on what you used on. Okay.
I had a list and I was really excited about sharing it with y'all, because the theme for Wit and Wisdom's Unit 1 is changes. I can identify changes in fall. And so it's changes in natures and things. And a part of it had to do with Native Americans. Our book that we've been talking about has a lot with crops. We talked about agriculture, harvest, and things. And so it gave one statement about Native Americans, did they just gathering a harvest, and then the kids, that was the main idea of a paragraph. And then they had to sort with 6 different details, and they had to determine if they were relevant or not relevant. And so it really tied back in there. It was an awesome activity. Got the discussions.
Okay, great.
In there. I thought it'd be fun for if we ever needed to do like a warm-up thing for the teacher table. I have them printed out so the teachers could do that sort.
Okay, good. We'll put you on the schedule. We'll put you on the schedule. That's amazing.
Icebreaker.
Yeah, it's cool. It works. I was a little nervous going into it with so many pieces of paper with the students, but they took it and ran. They did awesome.
Higher order thinking.
It was awesome.
So what Ms. Chissson has done is went ahead and typed up, as she said, the PGP. You guys, we wanted to do something centered around technology for you guys, but then we thought that, you know, this is something that you really have to achieve, and we want you to be successful for it. And so assessments we will do as a team. CER, we're still going to work on that as a school, but you have the choice with that one to select your own. Technology, we're going to have someone come in from the technology department to work with us on being maybe Google certified. So it's not outside, it's not going to be inside of your PGP plan unless you want to make that your alternative one.
I'm considering doing that, so if I write it, I'll share it with you, because I want to have that done this year. So.
And they also have like competition in the district, like the school that has the most. Like last year, they gave away a 3D printer.
Wow. How much is it, the certification? Do you know?
I think it was $10 for level 1, and then $25 for level 2. So it's not that expensive. And even if you decide to make that your goal, we'll try to pay the $10. I will try to, if we do it, we'll do the $10
Thank you.
to be reimbursed, so you'll pay it and then, reimburse.
And then we have SLTs, student learning targets. So we know you have to have 2, 1 in reading and 1 in math. So, what are y'all thinking for ELA? Now, Ms. Vernon, what the other gifted teachers, what they're thinking of is doing accelerated reader.
That gave me so many issues last year with that scaled score. If we did, I would like to do it with the, maybe grade level equivalency or something, as opposed to that scale score. I'm sure you remember, it was very confusing to determine the growth there. I don't think anyone could actually say what standard goes to this growth, so that was my problem with that.
I think, is it not more so the standard, but it's kinda like is it like
It's
a
the
grade level
overall
growth?
growth, I wanna say. I don't know, you can talk to Maurice about it, she did it. The only problem with EDMs with your children that we were talking about with Maurice, she said they were already, like, we were talking about math, but she said most of them were already mastering, so that didn't,
I
she
haven't
was
seen
gonna
my EDM
use.
scores yet. I need to get through.
So if you do use EDMs like what she's doing, she's going in and she's pulling standards from the grade above, like second, and she's
Right.
creating her own pre-test and then giving the post-test, so.
Okay.
That
And
might
then
put more
even-
work on you though.
Yeah, and we talked about like, even if you wanna try to assess for the mid-year,
Right.
with looking at what standards you taught that for, and then for your pre-test, just pulling those standards and maybe redoing some type of items with that particular standard, you can do that as well. Just to gauge where they are. for
So the
mid-year.
midterm could be different questions
Mhm.
relating to the same standards,
Mhm.
and then give that same
Right.
pretest at the end.
Right,
Okay.
right. And if you guys use EDMs for progress monitoring, y'all are gonna have to come up with some kind of form of, to progress monitoring, yeah, in the middle of the year. But know that, I know, if y'all don't use DRA, we're still gonna be using DRA, looking at the levels to guide our instruction, and we're also gonna be doing progress monitoring with DRA too. Particularly because I know a lot of those kids are coming in, we had 2s and 3s, and we're gonna have to do running records on those kids weekly if they're in tier 3, even if it's just something very informal, but to track them, because, and Ms. Baker's gonna talk about in a second, students that we need to have SBLCs on, we need to identify those students immediately.
I'm sorry, I want to go back to, you said you were, your book is How Do You Know It's Fall? The book read aloud, they have it on, read aloud on YouTube. So you may be able to,
I have
That's the
class
one
set of
she's
those
been
from
doing.
LRCE.
okay, so which one are you looking for?
Does the yellow leaf go? The yellow leaf change?
Does the yellow leaf change? Okay,
Something
all right,
like
y'all
that,
can go
the
ahead,
yellow
I'm gonna
leaf.
store it. I'm
It's
gonna
on my
look
lesson plan, I don't remember the exact title. The yellow
Let's
leaf.
chase on. If we use DRA, you know what the subgroups would be?
Like last year, it's gonna be contingent on how your students scored. So remember how we tiered them last year? It would be that same type of, and what I'm saying is if you wanna use that, we're progress monitoring, we're going forth with DRA. But you have the choice, or you can use EDMs. So, and if we use EDMs, we're gonna have to, because the CFAs just don't correlate. So we're gonna have to make a test and something that would give you, probably, we said in December, and then like maybe in March. There'll be 2 progress monitoring points. So
I
just
think
about
DRA
that.
is fair as
I'm
far
fine
as
with
the
DRA.
pictures.
SLT.
EDM's just, it's just words, there's nothing to form out of EDMs.
And so the due date was,
The 24th. And use your stuff from last year, I mean, to kinda,
And
to
if-
set.
If you guys need help getting onto HCIS or anything like that, come see me.
We probably have to get a new login.
If you don't
Yeah.
remember from last
Oh, yeah.
year.
Mhm.
you have to
Because if
reset.
it's, though, gosh, we reset everything.
Okay.
I will like that.
Like if you don't use it, I think it's every 90 days you have to reset it. But we're here to help, just don't submit.
These forms are for each of your homerooms to fill the students who are on target on the left column, and the students who may need to go through the SBLC process, and then include content areas of weakness. And I mentioned it to y'all a couple weeks ago during, PLC to have those students in mind. And so if you can fill this form out and turn it in, I'm gonna have this folder over on beside my computer, just put it in here by Friday.
Does this include my Scholastic Achievers or just low student? Scholastic
Anybody.
Achievers on a SBLC, like they're high, but they just need an SBLC to be, right?
So the SBLC is a process that we go through if you feel like any of your students need accommodations. So if they have an IEP, or because you may have a student that has an IEP, but it's not for, like, it doesn't provide read aloud or any of those accommodations, that it needs to be added to that.
But if you feel like all of your students are on target, you just record it in the left column and turn it in.
Okay.
And we're gonna document that we have documentation from everyone.
But we do not put ESL, because,
Unless you think, we do have some ESL students and it's not the language.
okay,
That's, cause I know like Miss Stewart has one.
So really think about those students who have been here since pre-K
Yeah.
and K.
I have a new kid, Justin.
New to
He's
LaSalle.
a two.
Yeah, but he's also a level 1, so
Oh, yeah, we'll
it is
get
the
that,
language for
right.
him.
Okay, so he would not go on.
He's seeing, no,
Okay.
not at this time.
Okay.
Now, when we start tracking, if he's not picking up and learning yet, but not at this time.
Okay.
Because we're gonna revisit this right
Yes,
before it's,
okay.
time, we're gonna revisit this form as well, because you may pick up some additional students throughout the year. So this is our very first one,
Okay.
and then we'll, take another look. But the thing is, we wanna make sure that we get all of our kids identified, because that was one of the things that Ms. Brister said to us, that if you have, a number of students that are being held behind, or if you have a number of students that are not scoring, really well on the LEAP assessment, then you should have probably already looked at in advance them being identified through a process. Alright.
And the last thing we're gonna look at today is some lesson plan review questions. Did the other do y'all have these questions down there? I wonder if they put them.
I'll put it in the middle. And we started this last year, just looking at our lessons and making sure that we're addressing the students' needs, and Ms. Baker's gonna go ahead and take you through, looking at your lesson plans.
So just starting with reading, what standards are you working on now in reading?
Yeah, still that, and then also, the main topic of a multi-paragraph, main idea.
Okay.
Is that the same thing? for you?
Same thing, yeah. Yeah, I forget, cause you're using the with, okay.
Yeah. it's a different-
And so have you created support for your visual learners, anchor charts, exemplars, things?
We even
them
used it for the
refer to?
test, for this, cold read on character traits.
You use the anchor
They were able
chart?
to refer to the anchor chart.
Now, one thing though, I do wanna say about the anchor charts, I know with EL, they don't really support, like, for example, main idea, detail, or character traits, like, we really have to pull and create.
Right.
There's no set one, like, they have these things that say anchor charts, but it's more like guiding questions,
Right.
like that, it's not.
Or like a graphic organizer?
Not
Yeah,
really,
it's not
no,
even
we
You just
like
have to
a
copy
bullet
it from the
list.
manual.
Okay.
It's not like,
It's like
You
steps
know how
on like,
journeys would have cause and effect, or, main idea, whatever, and they have this certain
Author's
chart.
purpose.
Author's purpose, it's not
Oh.
like that.
I just say that
So-
one first, because we still need to,
Yeah.
it's in the standard.
So we make them, but I'm just saying it's not there.
So y'all all have like a character trait anchor chart,
Mhm.
or,
We were sharing, but yeah,
Yeah, I need to get it on. See,
Like, I
that's
got the
specific. We've done like classic web graph, main idea with the details, copying off the journeys.
And how are workstations going?
so far so good. When Coach comes, I was like, where are they? They were waiting for
And I
me.
did wanna find out, I know Miss Finley sometimes gets pulled, so, I guess, but she would never really know, I guess, ahead of time, like if she's gonna be
So-
out or.
So in the last group, we kinda talked about what the workstations look like, and then also the utilization of your buddy teacher. And where you can put them, and make, like, it can be where they're maybe working with your, tier 2 group, or if they're not there, then, the students will have an activity that they can work with on their own.
Yeah, and I have that in place, but I guess just not knowing though.
When
if she's
the
gonna
day that
be
she-
in or not, and then I'm expecting her to come, but she's unable to come, and then
Yeah.
I had a planned, activity or station for her to do.
Okay, so that brings up a good point, like, as far as, we never know when, people are gonna take off, like, most of our times when people have been taking off, it's like they'll call in the morning time, and it puts us in a crunch where we have to come up with a plan just right off the bat. So it's very important, like if you know in advance that you're gonna need to take off, then let us know, and then we can communicate down the lines with you guys of you know, whether or not your buddy teacher, because that's all we have. We only have those people that we can pull from to go to other classes. And with it being such a small sub list to pull from, we really don't have that much to pull from. But going back to your workstations, what do you guys' workstations look like? Because they named some, and we would like to add it to the chart, because you may help someone else out. But what do your workstations look like, or what, you know, what are the different areas that you have for workstations?
We have fluency, we have word work, we have
It's got fluency.
vocabulary.
What does fluency look like?
We have the little phones, whisper phones, and they're reading decodables with a partner, and they're even tracking and putting down, like, let's say, well, this week we're doing O-A, and they'll have spelling words in there, and they're trying to find the words and write them down, and, you know, highlight the pattern. We have vocabulary, which goes with our stories, which is really hard, like earthquake, like, it goes with the close read book. We only have 6 of them. And it's just like a 5th grade level. I don't know how y'all feel about it, but every day.
So it's a speaking, listening vocabulary? Okay, got you.
And, I'll have a listening center just because I did that grant, so I have all those books and tapes, and some of them pretty hard. But, they go to computers, they, it depends what the skill is. I mean, if they're doing beginning, middle, end, they'll do sequencing cards and have to write 3 sentences and, you know, put the story in order. It just depends what the skill is.
Okay, so fluency is one that we can add to workstations. Go ahead, Ms. Bernie.
I like to have 4 for math and 4 for reading. I follow Ms. Harlow's example from last year, so in math facts, the kids should just be doing some sort of fluency drill. A is at seat, usually problem set at the seat, or sometimes with manipulatives, depending. T is with the teacher, or H would be hands on.
Okay.
At
For
seat,
math.
yes.
So acronym math.
And then for reading, I flip-flop. I'll usually do some kind of grammar, like I had a subject-predicate sort, where they had to write the sentences, and then this week, that's gonna be a writing station, so some kind of word work like that. And then future, later in the year, I'll go back to Wordly Wise, but I don't think my group's quite ready for Wordly Wise yet. And then we do act with the teacher, then there's just a silent reading, you read silently.
I'm glad you brought out the point about writing, because we need to make sure that we have a station that's
That's
set
a
for
must.
writing.
A separate writing
In
station.
ELA, Ms. Chissson talked about making sure that it can be a reading and responding. And then math, we were looking at making sure that it's a type 2, type 3 item that's maybe placed in the station. We also talked about just the use of our RDWW strategy. We wanna make sure that it's up in the classroom, on the student's desk, so that they can refer back to, and also, whenever there is a word problem, the students know to go ahead and draw their little box, and then they work it out. Like, that should be their attempt to show their thinking. And so we wanna make sure that that relays from our lower grade level, so it can continue on when it gets to our 3rd, 4th, and 5th, that they know, hey, I see a word problem, let me go ahead and do our school strategy. And Ms. Chissson talked about, maybe doing a strategy a month, so, you know, making sure that we hone in on that strategy and we get really, really good with it. And I thought that was really good as well.
Also, what we talked about with stations and just being a 1st grade teacher, just make sure that in your stations, because a lot of the children, see that as a playtime. So, you know, you put little letters out. I can remember putting up magnetic letters out at that time we had an overhead, and they would just kind of playing with them. You have to hold them accountable. So they should have something that they're coming away with, or something that you can check,
Yeah, they have to
and
turn it
giving
in.
them feedback on. So even if it is a fluency, are they graphing the number of words, or if it's the reading and response, they
That's what
have
I
that
learned.
constructed response, but they are
3 minutes.
giving, there's some kind of product that's coming with it, that's holding them accountable. We talked about in 1st grade too, particularly at the beginning of the year, stopping in the middle of your reading group when you're working with a small group, and going to those stations and giving them specific feedback right then and there. What's acceptable and what's not.
Especially the ones that in the morning for ELA for 3 hours, they wanna go on math. And the neighbors know, on the computer, they say, they'll come and say something, you know, cause they will do that.
It was you, and I'd love for you to share, Ms. Wolf, what Ms. Flores shared with you as a computer station.
She
has
has a
something.
bunch of like graphic organizers that, like, one of them sequencing, one of them is talking about character traits, another one is, you know, what is the problem and solution, but you have to go on the public library website, ebrpl.com, and they
It's a
type
wonderful
in,
website.
a book, and they find it, and then they have to fill out the worksheet as they're reading the book, so they identify problem solution, character traits, things like that.
Awesome.
And that's spiral skills, so it's things that they had in first grade, that would be a great spiral skills / technology workstation. But they're filling it out, I mean, as they're watching, and they can pause and fill out, and, so can you share that website?
Yeah, if you're a public library, you just have to have a library card number.
And we may let you show it quickly tomorrow.
Yeah.
Add you to the agenda tomorrow to quickly,
That's fine.
show it, or maybe get Ms. Flores in on it, like y'all two can maybe work together
I
to
think she
share.
comes on Tuesday, doesn't she?
She comes Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
So you would be the one that, well,
Yeah.
Wednesday
It's Wednesday.
is Wednesday, it'll be
Tomorrow's
Wednesday, so
Tuesday.
she'll be here, so
Oh,
if you and Ms. Flores can kinda maybe work together,
We have
we'll put
early
you on schedule
dismissal.
for
We're not
early
gonna have
dismissal.
this.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
maybe
Yeah.
like 10, maybe like, maybe 5 minutes,
So
you think you can do it in?
Wednesday?
Yeah, you're gonna do it Wednesday
Yeah,
after
yeah,
school,
yeah,
so
and I
maybe
can
like
make
5
copies for
minutes.
each table with that graphic organizers if they want.
Okay, great. Real quickly with math, what is the math standard that you guys are on this week, and how are you addressing the misconceptions for students that they may have for math? So what's math looking like this
We
week?
just finished up the making tens, the whole unit, module 1, and now we're starting centimeters.
Okay,
And, what I didn't realize, I thought the standard in second grade was metric, and I thought it's just metric.
Just now, later in module 7.
We'll get to it later, so.
okay. So
That's
what do
kinda
you guys
tricky
think the
on it.
misconceptions are gonna be with students when working with centimeters?
Subtraction, those word problems, I think is gonna be our
Right.
biggest step, is identifying keywords and word problems.
Okay.
Being able to.
How are you planning to address them, having a hard time with the keywords? Are-
As needed, I guess, in small group, following Eureka.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about pulling out those key, I know Maurice talked about like unpacking, the objective, but what about just the word problem itself? Like if it's a word that they may not understand, like going into,
You can make
detail about it.
I did one with powers last year where we made an anchor chart, so like subtraction, you have like common used words, so it'd be like take away, less, you know, things like common words that would go with subtraction.
That's great.
So,
That's
something
great.
like that.
Keywords.
You know what I
Yeah,
think too,
thank you.
is just having a general number sense, cause I don't even know whose classroom I was in and they were adding instead of subtracting.
Mm-hmm.
But then I said, well, go back to your problem.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like if you start with 13 and you know, they had to give some candy to friends or whatever, you think everybody's gonna end up with 23 pieces? You only started with 13, so it kinda all goes back to that number sense. So
And
even,
comprehending
and
the
comprehending.
Right. Like I always taught math as, it's telling a story, what's the story? And so before, and sometimes I'd even practice without numbers.
Mhm.
Like I would just say, they had candy and they gave some away, and then we would talk, are they gonna have more or less, or just so they're comprehending what's happening in that story. And just taking the math out of it for, you know, as a whole. Because sometimes the key words, it's definitely a great strategy, but sometimes it will
Depending how
go
it's
both
worded.
ways,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Especially when you get to third grade, you might say total, well, total is for multiplication and addition.
Right.
So,
Kinda like those sequence words for ELA, you can't always depend on first and after that next.
Oh, they get tricky.
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay, are you guys on science and social studies or science?
Science.
Okay, and so what are you guys working on with that?
I'm working on.
Well, she's excited.
I'm coming to present about erosion, hopefully on Friday, pending your approval, of course. And,
Okay, yeah.
the parent schedule. She's the president of our PCO, Ms. Thompson, and so she's actually an engineer for the State Department, creating barrier islands to protect Louisiana. And our guiding question for our unit are, what are barrier islands and how do they help Louisiana?
Great, cause that was gonna be my next thing, like what is the
Perfect.
guided question and how are you gonna draw it back to,
I think
are they gonna have to write about it or are they gonna just have to verbally know
we're
it?
still figuring out. We were going to start with landforms.
You
They need to
can
identify an island first. So kind of talking about the difference in that way in those areas, get the vocabulary down.
Okay.
And that would be a great anchor chart too.
Stewart's
because
real good
it
about
has plans.
sharing stuff for our, interactive books, like the scientists, that was really nice, so we put that in. All the safety tips.
Oh,
Thank you.
the
Yeah, I
responsible
remember that. I
scientists.
remember
Thank
that.
you, guys.
Alright.
All right, so the 24th, your PGPs and SLTs
Are due,
are
but
due.
don't submit them. Well, you can't for the PGP, you can go ahead and print that out, but we're gonna put them in a binder too, so I'll get that set.
And anyone that
This
comes after
form
October
is
first
due
won't
Friday.
find it.
No, and we have to make sure
Friday,
we get
put the
those
date for
October
Friday.
first enrolled, run, please, when is October
Is there a
first?
special place it goes
Because
to,
that is
like a
gonna
folder?
guide our SLTs.
Miss Baker would, take them. Which ones are you looking for? Yeah. Miss Baker has it.
Yeah, there's gonna be a folder, are you finished with it?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
All right,
What is
any
that?
questions, any
Oh.
concerns among the grade level? All right, have a
I'll turn
good
it
one,
over.
guys. Thank you guys so much for a great meeting.
Yeah.
Where's our binder?
Here, look, I didn't
You can
sign.
end it.